everybody, and welcome to LittleMissSwan. I am your host Miranda, and today we are talking about the new Cinderella movie that was released on Amazon Prime earlier this month. Before I start this movie review, I will admit that I was a little bit biased coming into watching it, just because I heard a lot of negative reviews about it, and I'm not like the biggest fan of Camila Cabello. Like, her music's good, I suppose, but with all the allegations and the racist stuff that happened, like, and also the fact that I really don't like James Corden. He is so annoying and problematic, and we just don't talk about him. For this movie, I was hoping for like a light-hearted take of the classic story of Cinderella, similar to the other franchises around another Cinderella story, and all that. Like, I was kind of expecting like that type of humor and it to be centered around like being a little bit, campy and like all that, or like more for kids. And I was kind of right. It ended up being like the ABC Family movie that came out, I think, in 2013 called Love Struck the Musical, starring Sarah Paxton, Drew Seeley, and Chelsea Kane. And the reason why it reminded me so much of that is because of how the movie was structured, and there was only one original song by Camilla in the film. The rest were covers, like, Rhythm Nation by Janet Jackson, Material Girls by Madonna, and also Somebody to Love by Queen.
Anybody find me somebody to
I don't know if anyone else picked up on this fact, but Somebody to Love was also in another Cinderella sort of type film called Ella Enchanted with Anne Hathaway. So I guess, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it was kind of like a nice little throwback. There was also a mashup between What a Man and Seven Nation Army with Salt and Pepper and the White Stripes,
back and forth through my mind like a minuet,
which was kind of weird with like that whole scene. I didn't really like it that much, just because it was kind of cringe. But in terms of like the mashup of the song itself, I kind of digged it.
and if I catch it coming back my way, I'm gonna serve it to you.
If I saw that on my YouTube recommendations for any music channels that I follow, and I would have kind of clicked on it and vibed with it, but I think this movie kind of ruined it for me a little bit. This movie to me felt a little bit weird because it never really defined the genre of film that it was. So to put it into context, we are told that the kingdom that Ella lives in is very old-fashioned, old-timey, and it's literally said to be like that.
Upon a time, there was an old-fashioned kingdom bound by tradition.
It's kind of like the classic medieval like kingdom sort of place. Like, you've got your traditional horse and carriage and your blacksmiths and all that stuff. A really strange juxtaposition to, 2021 like lingo and all that stuff, and, being woke, and it just, I don't know, it just felt really, really off to me. I didn't know what it was doing. The costume design is also all over the place, because you've got your traditional like fairy tale ball gown sort of things, and that too mixing in with something that I could buy at JJ's at the moment, like 2021 fashion. I didn't really understand it at all. One channel that I do watch, another fashion channel that I watch on YouTube, shout out to Tessa, she was live tweeting her thoughts and the whole thing, and I think she said it absolutely perfectly for like all the thoughts that I just generally have. Breaking it down to more of a character analysis, Ella was a good heroine to root for. Aside from being, that quirky, I'm not like other girls sort of thing, she's ambitious, and that ambition drives her to get out of her situation. She's very career driven and hopes that her dressmaker business gets her away from her stepmother and her daughters and that whole situation. She's very campy with her dialogue, but her ideals and values is something that I really did like about her. Her coinciding prince, Robert, is kind of like the Austin Ames sort of character in the original Cinderella story with Chad Michael Murray and Hilary Duff. His father, who's played by Pierce Brosnan, is an overbearing king and wants Robert to take over to be his successor and marry a princess. See Robert, he's a little bit rebellious and he doesn't want to take over. He's even a little bit quirky and that I'm not like other boys sort of thing as well. He even has an earring to prove it. As he doesn't want to be king, he goes into the village disguised as a peasant and this is where him and Ella first meet. It's kind of like a reverse Aladdin situation. So instead of pretending to be rich, he pretends to be poor in order to relate to her. And because of his great disguise, Ella doesn't realize that she's actually speaking to the prince. For each other, I think their dynamic is actually quite great. And I really like how Ella stood up to him with not wanting to marry him just because he was royalty. And also the fact that she didn't want to marry a stranger. Like, good for you. Good for you for standing up for yourself. Next, going on to the stepmother, who was played by the iconic Idina Menzel, and her two stepdaughters. I think that whole situation was well portrayed. They're not as vicious as most other renditions of Cinderella has been, but they still play the trope quite well. The dialogue said by the two sisters, I think, is very cringe.
In God's name are you doing?
Bringing color to our cheeks.
Do you think I look pretty?
I think you look so pretty. But honestly, who cares what I think? Who cares what anyone thinks? What matters is how you feel when you look in the mirror.
That's deep.
But again, that's kind of think what the movie was going for. I don't know. Ella's fairy godmother, oh my gosh, is my favorite character in this whole movie. Fucking slays. He started out to be a rescued caterpillar, which is a bit strange, but okay. And in turn, when he turns into a butterfly, the power of magic transforms him into the fairy godmother. In return for how kind and compassionate Ella was for rescuing him, he gifts Ella with her transformation and turning the mice into the horses and the carriage and the dress. Oh my gosh, the dress. Regardless if you like the design of the dress or not, I do like how they changed it from blue to purple. I don't know if the costume designer thought about it in the fact that it suited her complexion and made it a little bit softer on her compared to a sharp blue. Because comparing that to the transformation scene in the 2015 live action version, I don't know which I like more, because both were just magical to watch. So for example, the 2015 version was this. And the 2021 was this.
Shining star for you to see what your life can truly be. Shining star for you to see what your life can truly be. What you can truly be.
But yes, the fairy godmother or fairy godfather, however they want to identify as, absolute queen boss energy. Not girl boss, queen boss. But speaking of queens, we have Gwen, who is Robert's younger sister. She is an absolute legend. She's not afraid to speak her mind even when she's told to shut it. She still puts her thoughts out there. And the fact that she became queen at the end as well, and it just gives her a little bit of validation. I liked her little storyline in there as well. Lastly, I just want to have a quick little chat about the themes of the movie that I wrote down while watching it. It's quite quick, trust me. Right off the bat, we've got Ella facing the challenges of the world around her in her sexist kingdom and her pressures from her family, and how that the stepmother wants her to marry into a rich family or even just marry in general to a man. The stepmother constantly pushes even her own daughters to do the same so that they can sit idly by without a care in the world and not have any opinions other than how to please a man.
Fortune has smiled upon this house. My daughters have a suitor.
In fact, the notion of marriage in general was kind of the core storyline, and it was pushed a little bit too much to the point where it's just okay, here we go again. But I get how they had to do that in order to move the story forward. Paralleling this, I spoke about Gwen before and her expectations just to sit and shut up and just not be listened to just because she's a woman. This storyline was kind of pushed a little bit more subtly because she wasn't the main character. It contrasted well against Ella's storyline and how their endeavours in life are parallel to each other. Oh my god, this movie was filled with amazing dance sequences. When I spoke about how it reminded me of Love Struck the musical, it was phenomenal, and it was better than that. This was so over the top, it was so fairy tale. My favorite scene in the whole movie is when Ella and Robert are dancing at the ball. It was just pure magic, and it reminded me kind of like a first dance at a wedding. But with that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up because I'm going for too long. I quite enjoyed the movie as like a light-hearted thing, and I don't want to take it too seriously, and I know a lot of people are going to ridicule the movie further, so I want to keep it positive around here. It was a wild ride, but here we are. Anyway, I hope you liked this take on it. If you could do, the usual, like, subscribe, and all that fancy jazz, and I guess I'll see you in the next one. Toodaloo!